let's kind of talk about innovation and disruption, right? Like to have a healthy business ecosystem in partnership with, city strategies and things like that, you really need to tap into your entrepreneur communities. And there are a variety of ways in which that can happen, but these are some of the leaders who are actively working on that in Texas that I am really excited to highlight. And with that, Matt, why don't you explain a little bit about what makes you so passionate about what you do and why you do the things you do at Geekdom?
Sure. So very similar to the Ion in Houston, I'm part of a team at Geekdom. It's a startup community, startup space in downtown San Antonio. And kind of like a lot of our members, about 6 years ago, I stumbled in as a university student, passionate about entrepreneurship. And I kept doing events and being a part of the community. And fast forward about 3 or 4 years later, got pulled into being on the official team for Geekdom, co-working space located in downtown San Antonio. But I think there's something really special about working with people in innovation, entrepreneurship. We're a 24/7 space, so a lot of the people that are super passionate about what they're working on are there from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at night, and I just personally get a lot of energy from working with those types of people.
Awesome, thank you. Christine.
Yeah. And I'm so happy to be here, so I just want to shout you out, Joyce, because you're phenomenal. I'm going to try and look at you all. I might put my sunglasses back on. It's really hard to see for me. It's super bright, and there's a lot of white colors, so don't be offended. I'm going to do it, because I
It's
can't.
a vibe. You should do it.
There we go. So I'm Dr. Christine Galib. I'm over at the Ion, and if you're just coming in, this is awesome. Fill in the front, so I know there's a few seats up here. I'm over at the Ion, and remind me the prompt again. Innovation and
disruption.
And disruption. Why am I here? What are we doing? And where does this all take us? And so I've been doing this probably, I would say, over 15 years, over a nonlinear career, with being able to see the world through a different set of eyes. And that career path has brought me to the Ion, where I work with startups, entrepreneurs, investors, and innovators of all stages, wherever they are on their journey, to help them take their next step. And I think I'll stop there for now, and we'll get into the meat a little bit later.
Yeah, fantastic. So I've known Matt and Christine for a couple of years now. I was working at the Geekdom co-working space when I met Christine. She came for a tech rodeo innovation event, and we got to tour the Geekdom space. We were running civic innovation programs at the time, and it was really exciting. And I got to work on staff with Matt for a couple of years, and that was really fantastic. So what would you say is the biggest challenge right now facing startups or entrepreneurs who are coming to the table with new ideas and trying to find space for opportunities in Texas? Matt?
I would say a big piece of what we do is in-person community and programming and support. And I think that in itself is a challenge that we've, over the last 2 years, have dove deep into. A lot of Geekdom over the last 12, 13 years we've been in business has been co-working, bringing community together, but that entrepreneur education is now YouTube, different virtual Discord, Slacks, and it's a little bit intimidating when you're just getting started. So the role we play in entrepreneurship at Geekdom is supporting those people with just an idea, just getting started, and bringing that in-person community, those mentors, physically in person, because there's a lot of virtual options, but that in-person, nothing really changes events. You have the opportunity to network with others and meet mentors in real life.
Excellent. Christine?
So challenges. So just by show of hands, who would identify as an entrepreneur here, or someone that has ever tried to start something in their lives? Every hand should be up, right? We've all tried to start something. And that journey as a founder or as an innovator can be very lonely. And so the number one challenge, I think, to echo a little bit what was already said, is finding that community. Finding not just like-minded people, but also differently minded people, because we've all been in echo chambers where, like our friends and family, that's such a great idea, that's such a great idea. And then when you actually do product market fit and the investor says, how are you going to make money off of this, or how are you going to cut costs off of this, just kind of get that deer in the headlights stare. So find like-minded people and also differently minded people. And then know kind of who to go to for your next step. So if you've ever had to make a series of complicated decisions, which an entrepreneur or founder does every single day, that's very difficult to figure out, how do I make all those decisions? But sometimes if you just get to the next right step, then that's enough to take you to your next right step. And you can kind of take that journey of 1,000 steps and then break it down into one step at a time. So those are some challenges. I do also want to say the capital raising challenge, right? And so a lot of entrepreneurs, whether they're bootstrapping or whether they are putting personal capital in, there's a capital challenge, access to capital, especially for underrepresented minority founders. And so being able to create pathways that, and not just say, okay, well, here's this pathway, come and apply, because you're never going to apply to something if you feel you don't belong there. And so it's our job as leaders in this space to say, here's the application, I'm going to walk you through it, and I'm going to show you how to apply step by step so you get the capital you need, whether that's financial capital or social capital or human capital, talent, and otherwise.
Excellent. Thank you so much. If you look on the screen, we actually were supposed to have another speaker, Preston James, the CEO of DivInc, and much to Christine's point about, underserved communities, minority founders, women founders. DivInc has made a lot of commitments to supporting those types of founders through their programs, and actually they're expanding their reach. They were initially in Austin and Houston, and now they're going national, which is really exciting. And
I'll footnote that, and I'll shout Charisse out. She is here in the audience. She is with DivInc. She's waving over there. DivInc expanded out of Austin and made its second headquarters, or its Houston home, actually at the Ion. And they've run a series of cohorts. They just launched the application for a brand new cohort, which is all about Web3 and kind of the decentralized web, specifically towards social impact, right? So tech for good. And so we're super thrilled to have DivInc here. And I'll talk a little bit more about them later, because they're a strong partner. And as Joyce said, they're not just in Houston now. They've taken that next big leap forward going nationally.
Thank you for that. So, bridging the capital, I know, is definitely important to Geekdom as well. So, Matt, can you talk about some of the programs that you offer that kind of like helps put money in the pockets of founders to get them to that next right step?
Sure. I think a little bit of perspective, I think, from my own personal journey, like as a bootstrapped entrepreneur, is it's a big piece of not only access to capital, is also the right time. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs jump in, coming to us, asking, how do I talk to a VC? How do I get connected with that community in San Antonio or Texas? For the role we feel like we play is help on that education and when's the right time, how to make the ask. And we have an opportunity. We try to stay on the education side for majority of what we do, but we do have a $120,000 set up for our community. On a quarterly basis, we award a community fund, which is a safe note, to 4 to 5 companies a year. And for us, that's a way of potentially for about 5 companies providing that first line of capital for their startups and kind of kickstarting their journey. And San Antonio in the last few years has also seen an angel network grow. An Alamo Angel started about a little over 5 years ago now, and Charles, my boss, our CEO at Geekdom, serves on their board. And it's exciting to see South Texas and San Antonio kind of come together to meet the demand and support for capital for entrepreneurs.
That's awesome. Thank you. So, we have like industry folks as well as city folks represented in the audience today, like getting access to entrepreneurs. Like, how do we find ways to put people in the same room together to have great conversations, and then maybe figure out how to speak the same language, because oftentimes the motivations between cities and entrepreneurs aren't always in alignment. So I would love to have your thoughts on that. Christine?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Who's ever tried to learn a second language, right? Yeah, you've kind of got to go back to the basic building blocks and think through, okay, what are the rules for how this language works, and how does it get me to solving my ultimate challenge, right? And so once we put the challenge at the middle or the center of the room, entrepreneurs and administrators, whether it's municipal, whether it's administrative, whether it's university, we're all trying to solve the same problem, but we're doing it in different languages. We're using different tools, and sometimes we're not quite talking in the same direction. And so a few kind of tips and tricks: show up and be prepared to tell your story in a way that addresses the problem. because everyone's going to identify with the problem, not necessarily with your solution, because they don't sit where you sit. So they want to tackle the same problem. And so you'll have to do a little bit of work kind of finding the right words and language to tell your story such that it illustrates the problem. The second tip is showing up. So at the Ion, we have numerous events every week. One of them is Cup of Joey. It's at 8:30 on Friday mornings, and 100, 150 people show up and do exactly what I described earlier. They come and they introduce themselves, and you're networking, and you're exchanging business cards, ideas, all geared towards solving the problem, right? So it's less about me and where I'm coming from, and more about, hey, here's my card, here's what I do, here's the problem I'm solving. And we make matches that way. So I'll turn it over back to you.
Yeah, I think very similarly, we have a program that takes kind of what you were just mentioning with Cup of Joey. Is that what you called it? That's a good, I love that. Called Startup Bootcamp. And from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think I've been there, and anytime we facilitate this, you recognize Friday night, they come in, pitch their idea for the first time. You have 3, 4, 5-minute conversations all over the place. And then by the end of the weekend, they've said it 20, 30 times, and it's 2, 3 sentences. Because I think one of the things entrepreneurs are super excited to share everything on their mind and all the things that they want to build. But ultimately, whether it's a conference, it's someone in your industry, it's someone that has no idea what industry you're even in, you have to be able to adapt and communicate. And I think that's super important for entrepreneurs as you're just getting started, because there's one person probably doing 50, 60 different things to get this thing going, but communication and telling your story is like a super big piece of the education that we do at Geekdom.
I want to add just a footnote to that, because as entrepreneurs and as creative people, our minds are already so far into the future, because we're building the vision. We're there. We see the whole different world. But the problem is that nobody else sees that world, right? Because they're not where we are. And so it's our job then to break that down piece by piece, step by step, back to that learning a new language. You're learning the basic building blocks, one word at a time. And I think that communication, it goes back to how you're communicating, how you're telling your story, and how you're letting people know, okay, here's Excalibur, right? Excalibur is the King Arthur's sword for all the medieval historians out there. Maybe that's just me. But here's Excalibur. How do you use that as a tool to help win the entire battle against the problem, right? I'm not telling you how the battle ends, because that's already so far in the future, I can't picture that. But I can picture giving you Excalibur and watching you fight the fight with me as we go against the problem. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So one of the things that I think, disruption, right? Because this is not just about the innovation and the cool stuff. Like, disruption is fundamentally uncomfortable. And it is not always a pleasant exchange between people who are trying to solve the same problem. So when you get into a disruptive state with technologies or maybe processes or whatever, what's the value of partnering with startup companies, or, how do we deal with disruption in a way that can be useful or beneficial for cities or other industry partners to participate with us?
I think startups are probably the best to partner with, just because, at least from jumping into this role that I'm in right now, is kind of an entrepreneur turned working for a team of 10. And even just my brain and approach to the programmatic aspect of entrepreneurship we do is just super fast, and I think that's a big part of, as an entrepreneur, as a small team, chances are 24/7, working way longer than that 9 to 5. You're trying to tackle as many problems as possible just to get this idea off the ground. So chances are in weeks, some of these startups, can potentially solve problems, super fast, or give you a yes or no answer if it makes sense to pursue this innovation or disruption. I think about the last 2 months, and just like AI and OpenAI and the people that are using that, ChatGPT, are just miles ahead in just a few weeks, just because they started playing around with the tool, figuring out how to ask the right prompts. So, just those founders, entrepreneurs that are always on top of what's the next big thing are, primed to create disruption and innovation.
So right, a system likes to be in a homeostatic equilibrium, right? So any disruption is going to shift that balance, that equilibrium. So who's ever woken up, in the morning one day and said, I'm going to change everything about me today? Nobody. It doesn't happen because it's very difficult. And so when we talk about disruption, it's those small incremental changes that ultimately over time lead to a huge shift, right? If you change the trajectory of an arrow by just 1 degree, the arrow is going to fall, at its destination. It's going to be, vastly different depending on how you change that trajectory. And so in working with cities, and specifically I'll shout Jesse Bounds out over here in the front row, he's done a great job working with our startups at the ION, because we're able to level set and come in and say, here's the city's problems or challenges, opportunities, right? And then here's what the startups are working on. And we tackle the problem together with that partnership by coming to the table as listeners, right? No one person has the better solution or better way. We're here to find out a way that works for both parties and for all parties. So being a listener and then identifying what you don't know, right? So there's everything that we know, and then there's everything we don't know, and then there's everything we don't know. And that's where startups come in, and because they're so agile and tend to think in spurts and kind of focus in sprints, we need to take a little bit out of that playbook and bring that into organizations that should be moving slower, right? We don't want a city to change overnight because that will shock the system, that will upset the homeostatic equilibrium. So creating things like pilots, short 6-month pilots, or sandboxes, quote sandboxes, right? Where you can test something out and say, okay, here's a 2-week time frame, or here's a 2-month time frame. How does that work? And we've had some very successful pilots with the city of Houston doing exactly that, where there's no cost involved either. And both sides win, because then they can debrief and say, here are the lessons that we learned before we really take this big, so that when we take it big, we're not disrupting in a short amount of time.
Great, thank you. So you touched on a couple of things which I think are fantastic, both of you, that I think one of our later, so stick around, we got great content all day, don't run off. Towards the end of the afternoon, a kind of about piloting and procurement, and from a policy perspective what that looks like. Because not all startups get it right when they're building relationships with cities and industry partners. I think, from the city of San Antonio's experience with how bird scooters just sort of dropped in overnight and flooded our streets, and then we had other e-scooter companies also drop in guerrilla style their bikes, and what was going on with that. The city had to very quickly come up with a solution for how to manage a procurement process with limited vendors and limited number of e-scooters, because it was a guerrilla tactic, and it was viral for the bird company because they got a lot of visibility, but it really kind of delayed or caused some roadblocks with actually building city relationships. And so, there is a good way to approach these things in terms, it was very disruptive, but maybe not in the positive sense. But we ultimately ended up with a really great agreement between, I think, 3 or 4 providers that provide e-scooters to, the city of San Antonio. And now we have a whole new mobility system in place, which is pretty fantastic. So we have about 10 minutes left, and so I'm going to ask one more question to y'all, and then I'll open it up to the audience. And I really hope you do take your time to pick their brain, because they have a lot of really great knowledge that they'd love to share. And both the ION and Geekdom are part of larger urban development projects in your communities. So can you speak to some of the things that are starting to happen from that perspective, and the role that your programs will play in the future? Christine?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. So we just published our community benefits report, and it is on our website. You can find it, and that details the greater context of the work that we're doing. And so the ION is a physical building. It is situated in a 16-acre district that we're building out over the next 10 years. And our commitments to the city operate in numerous ways. One is not just the programs that we do inside the physical building that is the ION, but also making sure that we have affordable housing in place, right? So that we don't become the next Silicon Valley, where you have a certain percentage of the population that is doing quite well, and then everybody else is, not doing it as well as they are. Affordable housing. Also looking at workforce development programs to make sure that as ChatGPT comes out and as OpenAI gets more prevalent, we actually understand what that means for us and how we use it. And so that someone who is going through maybe a 4-year degree, maybe a 2-year degree, maybe someone who decides college is not for them, still has an opportunity to participate in the upskilling programs that are going on. So those are some of the highlights of the greater context that we're operating in.
One of I think a good example to talk about is Geekdom is an Iran building located in downtown San Antonio, and one of our sister companies, 80/20 Foundation, is also in that building. We're also and one of their first initiatives, that foundation supports entrepreneurship, education, and focus on downtown. I think it's back. And focus on downtown. So they started this conference about 5-6 years ago as independent to Geekdom, and recently we just kind of helped take this over. It's now an extension of our programming, but the entrepreneurs that are coming to Geekdom, that are coming down to that conference, are looking for to be in downtown San Antonio to be a place for them to thrive, grow their companies, and Geekdom kind of plays that first pivotal role in their first office, their first space to meet other entrepreneurs. And I think it's an exciting for that group, for that community to be doing it in downtown San Antonio.
That's fantastic. Thank you. A couple of things that you didn't mention that I'm going to because I want to promote both what you guys are working on. So the IONS footprint does have plans to grow and this create an actual hub, right, which you can speak to in just a second. And San Antonio's Geekdom's initiatives, like there's a new data science building being built by the University of Texas San Antonio that is going to serve as a really great cybersecurity and data science hub. But Geekdom has also decided to make investments in the Rio Grande Valley and to help spur innovation that's happening in the RGV, which I think is going to be incredibly great to see how that community can be uplifted and more connections can be made at a regional perspective. And so, Christine, if you want to talk a little bit about the district, and then Matt, you can kind of speak a little bit more about that.
Sure, and as we think about kind of a live, work, play city, Houston is not exactly contained and compact. And so it was very important to us to have a district where you can live, work, and play all within 15 minutes. So we're situated on a public transit line, the Metro line, which is super efficient if you're trying to get to Rodeo or downtown or the Med Center. We're bounded on the south by the Med Center and then go through kind of the Midtown and then downtown area of Houston. So being able to have that land and that place where talent density can congregate from all different types of perspectives. So actually Theater Under the Stars will be moving into our district, and you might think, well, why is a theater program wanting to be in an innovation district? Because if you've ever worked the lights or sound or set of a theater, that's entirely tech at work. Being able to have the arts also included spurs creativity as well. And so when we are walking through a city, and I've walked through downtown numerous times and we see art on the buildings, that also inspires us as well as supports our creative class. And we have a ton of creatives here, whether they're in film or media or music, but being able to have that centralized district where they can come together and say, I'm a musician. Well, I need marketing help. I need production help. I need to record a song. I need website development help. I can come to the district and get that all done in less than half a day, as opposed to having to go numerous places for it. So I think that answers the question.
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, so I'll start with the university. The UTSA has decided about 5 years ago to invest. They have 2 campuses, one in downtown San Antonio, one campus about 20 minutes from downtown. And I graduated in 2016 from UTSA and was in a situation where I had 2 internships downtown, around walking distance from Geekdom, and the challenge created of, okay, how am I going to do this and still go to school and be a student? And one of the things I got really excited about as graduating when they started to have this discussion is they wanted to create a presence of university students close to Geekdom in downtown San Antonio. The first school is the data science that you were talking about, and the second one soon to come is focused on entrepreneurship. So for us in our programming at Geekdom, we do everything we can to support that university super near, as an entrepreneurship major at UTSA, it's something that I'm super excited about because the opportunity to be walking distance from Geekdom, walking distance from a lot of different places is huge. And ultimately, I think will keep students post-college recognizing that there's opportunities, there's ways to be an entrepreneur right out of school. And then the second part is Geekdom has partnered with eBridge. It's in Brownsville, in the RGV area. It's a part of the university down in Brownsville, and one of the reasons why we're partnered with them is they just reached out to us and wanted to create a Geekdom-like experience for their entrepreneurs in Brownsville and the RGV area. So one of the programs that I was just talking about, Startup Bootcamp, one of our first ways of partnering with them was bringing that program down to there. So about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got to spend the weekend. Part of this was exploring, does this make sense? Does our programming fit what they were doing? And that community was super excited, and that was kind of our first test of many more programming. And the biggest reason why we're doing this is there's power in a community versus city by city approach. I think it's been exciting to watch Texas across the board come together. Houston, Austin, Dallas, El Paso, Brownsville, all these different cities across Texas. Thank you. It's just ultimately going to help the entrepreneurs continue to grow and recognize that there's a community of a whole state behind them supporting their mission.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, we have time for at least one question. So hopefully we've been thinking one question.
But it's got to be a really good question.
It's got to be a good one, otherwise we're not doing it. No? Okay. Well, if there are no questions for these wonderful panelists, we'll just ask final thoughts. What is it what didn't you get a chance to say that you'd love to say? Christine?
Yeah, final thoughts. I have many, but I'm just going to pick one. And it plays to this notion that as a city, we're a system of systems, right? It's not just one system and you can control for one variable and that's it. X plus 2 equals the answer. It's like a multivariate problem or challenge or opportunity. And so to solve those, we not only need new ways of thinking, but we also need to have everybody involved, because everybody is an asset to our city in some way, because we're all citizens of that city. So as city leaders, our task then is to figure out, how do I involve everybody, no matter where they are or where they're coming from, so that their voice is heard, so that they're involved in the decision-making processes on some level, right? Whether that's a survey or a focus group, and so that you're building buy-in along the way, because ultimately we're serving the citizens of that city.
I think one of the things I was thinking of earlier is one of the first iterations of this bootcamp program, and a lot of program we've done is Joyce with you a few years ago. And we were talking about the importance of community, bringing people together. One of the ways I jumped into smart cities and being a part of that conversation was facilitating some of that weekend programming, where we really just brought people that were passionate and interested in learning about smart cities, civ tech, what the city was doing. And there have been some exciting journeys for various entrepreneurs and companies that have been built from that type of stuff. So, it's a good reflection in this moment, and meeting some other people at this conference about, exploring more of that programming for our entrepreneurs.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Can we give them a round of applause, please?